All right, so we'll call this session of the King George County Planning Commission to order. If you would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Okay, we'll open up the floor for public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to address the commission? Please, if you would, come up, state your name and address, and if you would, please keep your comments to 3 minutes or under. Yes, sir. No, nothing specific.
Mr. Moss, you opened it for public comment, correct?
Yes, if I didn't use the proper language, public comment, please.
My name is Tom Brooks, and I live at 6365 Berry Plains Landing in King George. And our community met with Linda Carter last night, and there was a very worthwhile conversation. She was courteous enough to give her time and get here early. The concerns we have are firearm noise, and I believe she's willing to make some pretty good concessions on that, particularly rifle firearms. I know she's thinking that the rifle firearms will only be for the King George County Sheriff's Department. I'm not sure you can enforce that, though, if other departments want to do the same thing and you allow King George to do it. Our second concern is if for some reason the ownership of this facility, once it's in operation, decides to either fold it or turn it over to someone else or sell it, that it would go back to an A1 zoning, and whatever the future use would be would have to go back through the special exceptions process again.
Thank you. Do you want to specifically state?
Good afternoon, good evening. Brandon Waldron, 16080 Canning Way, King George. So our property would abut up against the property that there's in the training facility, and they have been fantastic through this process. You know, I would have never thought initially that I would be standing here saying that I'm going to support a gun range going beside our property, but they've done a great job kind of answering all of our questions and kind of addressing the concerns that my wife and I have. And, you know, I'm in full support of this operation, and I think that it's a great thing for the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Miles Hastings, 15057 Canning Way. I represent Canning Farm Limited Partnership. We share a 3/4 mile boundary with the proposed project. We, as one of the last family farms in the county, we do appreciate this project. The last thing we would look forward to is residential growth close to our boundaries. That's always a challenge. So we are in support of the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dines, anyone online?
No one wishes to speak, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So we will close public comment. All right, approval of minutes for November 15th meeting. Discussion, comments?
Motion to approve the meeting minutes for the November 15th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting as is.
We have a motion. Second, all in favor? Any abstentions?
Mr. DeVries abstains.
All right, motion passes, 2 abstentions.
Who was the other abstention, please?
Mr. DeVries and Mr. DeCordo.
Thank you.
All right. Naval Support Activities, South Potomac Community Planning Liaison Officer, Mr. Lynch.
Unfortunately, Mr. Lynch is not with us tonight. He came down with a bad case of the flu. But for the record, Mr. Hastings' position has been filled by Mr. Adam Lynch. He is eager to work with us going forward in the future. And so you're aware, I brought him up to speed on the military overlay district, and in particular importance, the map and where things were left. So we'll see where we go with this one.
Very nice. Yep. We can look at the acoustic signatures. No plan reviews. So we'll have a public hearing, and we'll start with case number Z-2023-00151. Rezoning request by Port Graham Corporation to rezone with proffers a 10-acre portion of tax map parcel 3114 located in the Rappahannock River settlement area from industrial to A1 limited agricultural. And just so we're all on the same page, staff and the applicant, these are 2 separate cases, but they're going to go through the entirety of their presentations. It's going to cover both portions. So we kind of get it all at once, but we will address them individually.
Hey,
Hi,
how are you?
doing well. How are you?
Good.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Angela Farugi. I'm a third-party contract reviewer on behalf of King George Community Development, and I will be presenting the case before you this evening. There are 2 cases, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, in front of you this evening, which is the conditional rezoning application as well as the special exception permit for the Kenson Farm training facility. Okay, the location of the proposed facility is on tax map 31, parcel 14, just east of Cleve Drive. If I can get my pointer right, yep. And just north of the Rappahannock River. There's a vicinity map here as well. As mentioned, there are 2 cases before you this evening, the first of which is the conditional rezoning, in which the applicant has requested to rezone with proffers a portion of tax map 31 parcel 14, which is approximately 10 acres from industrial to limited agricultural. And I will be presenting that one first in the series. And then the special exception permit, which once the entire parcel is zoned to A1, the applicant is requesting a special exception permit to allow a training facility, which is now only allowed as a special exception in the A1 district. As you can see, here's the parcel here in question, 3114. As you can see by the light green, the majority of this parcel is zoned A1, which is about 197 acres. And then there is just sort of the small piece right here in the center that was previously zoned to industrial. It's approximately 10 acres that was zoned. I'll get into the history, I guess, on the next slide. Sorry. Yes. So the 10-acre portion that's zoned industrial is what is currently being considered this evening to be rezoned to A1. It was zoned industrial back in September of 1989 to allow for a sand and gravel extraction pit. The applicant is requesting to rezone that to A1, which would make the entire parcel zoned A1. And this rezoning request is in keeping with the original rezoning I have a proffer here from the 1989 rezoning, which stated that within 15 and a half years from the date of commencement of the extraction of processing and sand and gravel, that this applicant should apply for a rezoning to, it says from industrial to the appropriate zoning in the area at the time of application, whether that be agricultural or residential, and requesting that that 10 acres be rezoned as stated. Some characteristics here of the site, like I mentioned, they're requesting the vast majority is already A1. They're requesting that the 10-acre parcel be rezoned to A1. The minimum lot size in A1 is 10 acres. Overall parcels by a recent boundary survey by the applicant's engineer is 207.44 acres. And again, the applicant is seeking to conditionally rezone from I to A1 with proffers, which will allow them to request a special exception for a training facility. Okay, the proffers that are voluntarily being offered by the applicant in association with the rezoning include that the use and development of the property shall be for a training facility as shown on the preliminary site plan that was submitted and is included in your full packet. I will also show an overall layout of that later in my presentation. Other by right uses permitted in A1 may be permitted. The training facility itself may include the following training elements: a 50-yard pistol-only gun range, 1.5 mile paved driving course, 3/4 mile unimproved driving course, a 7,500 square foot classroom building, a tactical driving skid pad, and an outdoor training canopy. And again, I'll show the locations of those later, and I'm sure the applicant would be more than happy to give additional information on specifics for each of those elements. The fourth proffer here just ties them back to the conditions that the training facility would be governed by the conditions that were established in the special exception case, presuming that passes. And then they will also proffer that no mining activity shall be permitted on the property except as what's necessary to go through the reclamation process through the Virginia Department of Energy. So getting into the second request for this evening is the special exception case. Here you can see the overall layout. Here's Cleve Drive. There you'll enter through this existing gravel access drive, which match sheets up to here. You can see the match line there. And then as indicated, we have the 50-yard pistol only. If you can scroll up, please. Thank you. The pistol range, that's good. The pistol range will be located here. Then the 1.5 mile paved driving course is here. The 3/4 mile off-road course right there. The 7,500, again, and this is all subject to final engineering, but this is their conceptual plan at the moment. The 7,500 square foot classroom will be here, skid pad there, and the outdoor training canopy here. Okay, a little bit of a history on the training facility. As you guys, I'm sure, are well aware, the training facility as a use was adopted by the Board of Supervisors in October of 2023 to allow a training facility to first define what a training facility is, and I don't need to read the definition for you guys. I know you're well aware of what it is, but then the board also passed to allow a training facility only by special exception in an A1 district. Let's see. All right. Per the applicant has submitted a justification and project details, so I have lifted that right there because I figured nobody other than the applicant, nobody could say it better than the applicant themselves, what they're intending to do out here. So I can read that if you'll indulge me. The proposed Kenson Farm Training Facility to be located on tax map 3114 is a professional training center to be operated by the Port Graham Corporation that offers low-impact training for local, state, and federal agencies to include civil servants, diplomats, and/or their families and support staff in preparation for overseas and domestic assignments throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia and beyond, including the use for training for King George County Sheriff's Department. The facility will provide the most innovative techniques and skills across a variety of obstacles, situational awareness, and safety. The property will be owned and operated by Port Graham Corporation. Port Graham will employ a full-time on-site facilities manager and numerous support staff. And again, I've just repeated here the elements proposed for that training facility, those 6 elements that we discussed that is shown there on the preliminary site plan. Let's see. Getting into potential impacts, the utilities, the project will be served by private well and septic. There is an existing well and septic on site, but they have committed to abandoning that if it's not deemed fit for the facility, which is typical. They'll go through this during the site plan and design engineering stage. They do plan to pull non-potable water for things such as watering the skid pad, fire suppression, irrigation, et cetera. That will be pulled from the existing pond that is partially on their site and partially on a neighboring property. VDH has reviewed and commented on this application, and it's pretty standard stuff. The first comment there is just that any on-site septic would require submittal by a licensed on-site soils evaluator, or professional engineer. That's standard that they do during the final design stage. VDH did note that the site has undergone extensive surface and subsurface disturbances with the formal sand and gravel mining operations, which could impact future on-site sewage disposal system proposals. But again, that'll be something on the applicant. They have a very large site to be able to try to find a suitable drain field. And then they had shown a potential area for the drain field to be within the power line easement, but that is allowable, and VDH commented on that as long as they got a letter of approval from that easement holder to allow for the installation as well as maintenance of the facility, that was acceptable. Let's see, all environmental comments were addressed adequately. There are wetlands on site, but they're at the far northern area of the property. The applicant is not proposing any improvements anywhere close to the wetlands. Those wetlands, there's a high confidence of where they're located because they were field verified by Rappahannock Environmental, and then they were survey field located by Legacy Engineering, the applicant's engineer. So again, all proposed improvements are a significant distance away and no impacts are currently proposed. Yes, the applicant acknowledged and further conditioned at staff's request that they would obtain authorization from DEQ or any other applicable agency to use that existing pond for stormwater management, for fire suppression, and irrigation. Let's see. And then, of course, as usual, all stormwater and Ches Bay Act requirements will have to be met at the time of final site plan. Okay. From a school's impact, no students will obviously be generated with this site as there no residential component, so there's no impact to schools. Let's see. Moving on, traffic, transportation, access. Access will be via the existing ingress-egress easement through adjoiner tax map 31 parcel 13. That existing access road is in a dirt, gravel, unimproved site. I'm not sure if anybody's been out there, but it was acknowledged by the applicant and further conditioned that they'll upgrade that access to, in our words, compacted gravel, traversable surface acceptable to King George County Fire Marshal and capable of serving all anticipated vehicles accessing that property. The preliminary site plan further acknowledges that access road is a proposed 24-foot, so wide enough to accommodate any of the fire apparatus to facilitate the expected traffic. The entrance at Cleve Road will need to be upgraded and improved to meet all applicable VDOT and standard engineering standards, and they did note as such on sheet 4 of their preliminary plan. There's some small text out there, but that's really just to communicate that the expected traffic that's going to be generated by that site, that's going to be further analyzed and determined at site plan. It's a relatively low number, but there aren't a lot of existing case studies out there for a training facility under the standard ITE trip generation. So instead, we are looking at expected traffic based on the number of students that they'll have in the facility, as well as instructors, deliveries, things of that nature. Since it won't be open to the general public, there aren't things such as visitors and things like that. So if you noticed on your site plan, they have a 38 vehicles per day shown with a note that talks about that at site plan as to be accepted by zoning administrator and VDOT, that number is not final. They're showing that as a minimum, and staff found that solution to be acceptable. We've accepted that statement, and we will work with the applicant at the final site plan stage to determine the traffic, which will in turn determine the requirements for the entrance design. Finally, King George Fire and Rescue reviewed this application and commented that a Knox box would need to be in place at the entrance of the property if the facility is to be gated, which it is. And the applicant has shown that on the preliminary site plan and committed to do that. Maybe moving on. Oh, sorry, my apologies. From a fiscal impact, staff recommended, it's not a requirement, but recommended that the applicant submit a fiscal benefit analysis, which they did. The applicant has estimated just over $81,000 in an annual tax revenue benefit. This table was what the applicant has provided. It should be noted, community development did request a third-party review, but as of today's date, we have not received that back. So. Let's see, moving on to still within potential impacts, public safety. The applicant has included several conditions specifically to address the safety concerns. And I don't need to repeat it again, the 6 elements that the facility will include, but several conditions have been, and I'll get into those on the next slide, have been made in regard to the safety of the facility, such as noise reduction, fencing, restrictions, on racing, etc. Okay. I'm debating whether to read these all to you. So there is a complete list of conditions that is included in your packet. These are the ones that I lifted that were most applicable to safety, which include the hours of the outdoor training elements, 7 a.m. to dusk, Monday through Friday, except in the event that a state of emergency was declared. King George County Sheriff's Office and Fire and Rescue may utilize the training facility outside the hours of operation if they need. The gun range will utilize safety design and noise reduction measures, including a berm and a protective wall. No rifles are allowed on site except for King George County Sheriff's Department. Again, the facility will not be open to the general public. Access to the facility will be limited to employees, deliveries, etc. The site will be secured by fencing and a gate. There will be no dormitories that will be permitted on property. Nobody will be living there. There will be no residents permitted on property. Camping is not going to be allowed on the property. Vehicle racing is prohibited. They are committing to stock passenger vehicles, meaning they're not going to allow racing vehicles or vehicles that have otherwise been modified. And the maximum design speed of the courses will not exceed 50 miles per hour. And they've committed that there will be no military-grade explosive weapon simulations detonated on the property at all. Again, I apologize for the small text. I just wanted to get this up here in case anybody had any questions on that. Chief Moody has also reviewed the application and offered the following. He recommended that the facility have an approved emergency action plan in place. And he had some particulars that he wanted in there, and he then offered the department's assistance in that matter. The applicant has acknowledged that comment and is willing to do so. Fire suppression, Fire and Rescue has indicated that along with the building official, they would work closely at site plan with the engineering team to determine the level of fire suppression that would be needed. One thing I wanted to bring up is that community development did review the applicant's response on the existing pond, because the existing pond does straddle a property line. And what we wanted to be sure of is if for some reason the pond on the side of the joiner that they can't control completely went away, would there still be an adequate stormwater management and water available for fire suppression? And the applicant's engineer analyzed that, provided a response back. We reviewed that from a technical perspective and accepted their response that indeed it would. Finally, Chief Moody noted that there would need to be an approved fire lane near the classroom and a Knox box. And again, the applicant has acknowledged that and is proposing a Knox box, shown that on their preliminary site plan. Sheriff Giles also reviewed the application and in his words offered no negative comments, and instead noted that he believes the sheriff's office will benefit from the training facility, including the firearms range, the driving courses, and the classroom space. The applicant has proposed 21 conditions. I will defer to the Planning Commission if you would like me to read them all for the sake of the record, or if you would like to refer to them in your packet.
One way or another, I'm fine if we refer to the packet. Anybody want to hear them out loud? Okay, we'll press on.
Okay. So, moving on to compliance with the comprehensive plan. The development is located within the Rappahannock River South Rural Development Area. The primary development objective is to encourage the continued rural nature of the area. It should be noted that a relevant goal, number 13, was to promote redevelopment efforts by encouraging the reclamation of previously mined land through enforcement of a special exception permit and regulation of the Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy, which is precisely what this applicant is proposing to do. So based on that and the fact that the conditional rezoning associated with this property is taking the small 10-acre portion from a higher intensity industrial use to a lower intensity limited agricultural use that keeps in the concert with the continued rural nature of the area, staff has determined that this project, both the rezoning and the special exception permit, would be in concert with the comprehensive plan. Here we go. So in summary, the two cases before you this evening are the conditional rezoning that 10-acre portion from industrial to A1, and the special exception permit, which would allow the applicant to have a training facility in an A1 district. Staff's analysis of the conditional rezoning is that, again, within the comprehensive plan in the Rappahannock River South Rural Development Area, the conditional rezoning is taking it to A1 from the higher intensity industrial district, which is in concert with the comprehensive plan. The rezoning request itself is required by the initial rezoning of the property that was discussed back in September of 1989. And the rezoning will provide new proffers regarding the training facility use. So because of all those factors, the Department of Community Development staff recommends approval. Again, I understand that these, in a public setting, it is good to show the 9 findings that the zoning ordinance requires for a special exception permit to be issued. Again, this is in the staff report. It is also on here on the PowerPoint slide. I am happy to read through it. I think the highlights here are that for each of the 9 findings that shall be considered when the Planning Commission and the board consider a special exception permit, it is staff's opinion that the applicant has done their due diligence and has adequately addressed all 9. Would anybody like me to read them? Go with no. Okay. So there we go. So based on that, the Department of Community Development staff recommends approval of the special exception permit as well. So to make it formal, the Department of Community Development staff recommends that the King George County Planning Commission forward case number Z2023-00151, request by Port Graham Corporation applicant to rezone with proffers a portion of tax map 31 parcel 14 from industrial to limited agricultural to the King George County Board of Supervisors with a recommendation for approval. And we also recommend that the King George County Planning Commission forward case number Z2023-00150, request by the applicant to obtain a special exception permit for the use of tax map 31 parcel 14 as a training facility, which will provide technical defense and orientation training for federal law enforcement, civil servants, diplomats, etc., and/or their family and staff in preparation for overseas assignments as related to military and defense assignments to the King George County Board of Supervisors with a recommendation of approval. At this time, I'm happy to take any questions that the chairman or other commissioners may have.
Just a quick question, or maybe a couple. I don't have any issue with the rezoning, other than that, has the reclamation from the mining activity already occurred, or is the applicant committing to doing that?
It's currently underway, and I have visited the site, and they are in the process of reclaiming the mine.
So will it be completed? Does the applicant own the property now?
Does the applicant own the property now, or is it contract owned? We're closing on Jason's decision, closing on September 21st.
Yeah, my only concern is that I want to make sure the reclamation of the mining activity is completed, either by the current owner or by the applicant when they take control of it.
Could we have you come to the microphone, please? Sorry to make you repeat.
I'm sorry, I'm Richard Stewart. I represent the applicant. Right now, the permit requires, the permit from the Department of Energy requires the current permittee to do the reclamation. And that has the force of law unless for some reason they decide to take over the reclamation, and I don't know why they would. So the mining company has to do that pursuant to the permit that they got from DMME.
Like I said, in terms of the rezoning, that's the only concern I have. The other question I would ask staff and of council is, I think I know the answer to this, but I just want to confirm it. Should the applicant be granted the exception and this facility is built, at some point in the future, if it's sold to another entity, but it's still the same training facility, that new owner is subject to all of these conditions. My biggest concern is that it will never turn into a commercial activity for the general public. Limited to the way they've stated it, I don't have any issues with it. I just don't want to see something happen to it 10, 15, 20 years down the road.
So any future owner would be bound by the proffers and conditions which specify its use other than by the public safety for training, and the specific being the sheriff and the fire department. It would have to be students as defined in those documents. So it wouldn't be open for an unrestricted gun range.
Not open to the general public. All right, so the county's police and fire department, or sheriff's office and fire department are allowed to use it. What about other counties in the area?
Is the question about other, that they have they have allowed or conditioned that King George County would be allowed to use, the fire marshal and the sheriff's department would be allowed to use the facility. Is the question whether other neighboring localities will be
Yes.
allowed to? As currently conditioned, that's not allowed. So, no, sir, just
But-
King George County.
At this point, if we have specific questions for a staff rep, let's do that. But if we're ready, we can bring up the applicant because I think it might answer some questions.
Mine were aimed towards staff, not the applicant on this one. So, yeah, I think that's the extent of my issues for staff, so.
Anyone else?
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir?
Just really more the nature of a clarification. Would it be accurate to say that at all times the operation of the facility has to comply with the King George noise ordinance? There's no out or exception to that in any respect?
That was actually discussed just prior to this planning commission meeting. The applicant would be bound by the noise ordinance, is my understanding, but there is an exception for the discharge of firearms. Is that correct, Kelly?
Yes, and in the existing ordinance and also the ordinance that's proposed to be amended, there's an exception for the lawful discharge of firearms. However, Senator Stewart and I discussed that lawful discharge of firearms is likely not to include commercial activities. So that's something that the Board of Supervisors could consider with regard to general applicability. But in this case, they're also proffering or conditioning certain noise limiting factors as well.
Well, I think we'd like to get some clarity on that, only because, that's going to be a big part of what's going on there. It's probably a good part of the day that will be firearm discharge. So I, for one, would be much more comfortable knowing that at the very least they had to comply with the noise ordinance. And then the other clarification I had is I see in the staff recommendation that you've sort of described the class of people who are allowed. We know that the general public will not be allowed to use the facility, which begs the question, what is the class of folks that are allowed to use the facility? Does that act as an actual
They want to impose a
Condition,
condition that
yeah.
says we have to abide by the noise ordinance. We're fine with that, because we have to by law anyway.
I can't.
Senator Stewart said that they have no problem. We impose conditions, and the applicant would take no exception if we were to impose a condition that says that they have to comply with the noise ordinance, that they would condition that. Or we would condition it, and they would accept that condition.
I think we all ought to take advantage of that, yeah?
Well, so hold on.
I would agree that we should probably add that to the conditions and possibly even put some sort of a measurement of that.
Well, before we get too deep in the discussion, I think we should
Right.
let the applicant come up and give their piece, because I do think there's potential that the applicant's presentation could answer some of these questions.
For sure, although I really appreciate the, essentially the offer to encode that, if you will, that it'll comply with the noise ordinance. I, for one, would be very comfortable and happy if you would. That's all I had.
Thank you, sir.
One last question about the condition there with the King George County Sheriff only being allowed to use the facility. Does that include King George County Sheriff inviting other sheriff departments to participate in a training facility that they conduct? Would they be allowed to do that and thus allow other sheriff departments to be there while King George County is using the facility? How would we interpret that in terms of enforcement of the conditions?
I think as it's currently conditioned, they are giving, the King George County Sheriff's Department and Fire and Rescue Department may utilize the training facility. Well, that's outside of the hours of operation. However, I think the way that it is worded, we could certainly ask legal's opinion, but I believe the way that it's worded, it would limit it just to King George County.
Yeah, I was kind of implying that
Yeah.
that was a question for legal to interpret and
apologize.
give us an assessment, please.
I think that if there's an interest, it could be further clarified I think that there are possible opportunities for bona fide mutual aid exercises. For example, I was at a training recently where I believe the officer was from Colonial Beach, and he said at one time, he was kind of a SWAT team. He was one of the few people in the area who was trained as a SWAT team member, so he would be called upon to other jurisdictions. So I think within reason, some possible mutual aid, but it couldn't be just sheriff gives permission for some other department to conduct all their trainings. It would have to be a specific training exercise.
To Mr. Nicely's point too, if I may, it seems as though King George is the only locality that's allowed to use rifles at the facility. So I would kind of dovetail into his question about, are we going to invite other localities in to use rifles? How do we know that it's going to be limited to King George County as far as rifle usage? Because that goes back to noise abatement and public nuisance. And the other element of that is King George is allowed to use it outside of the normal hours of operation. So would that be something authorities would have a badge that they could swipe in, or would it need to be scheduled? Would it need to be somehow like, okay.
The applicant is committed to addressing
Okay.
that in the application.
All right.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And for the applicant, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Planning Commission, I'm Richard Stewart and I represent the applicant. Thank you very much, Angela. That was a fantastic presentation and overview of the project. We've got Linda Carter, who's the senior project manager on this here. We've got our engineer staff / planner, Jeff Harvey, and we've got Carrie O'Neill, who designed the range, who can answer any questions that you need tonight regarding any of these issues. Linda will give you a little more in depth on a few of the issues, and we're not going to duplicate what Angela presented, and Carrie can tell you more about the design of the shooting range and how that is designed to mitigate noise. It of course is just small arms, a pistol, as far as the training goes, but we've offered to the King George Sheriff's Department only. And there's no qualification to that. It's only the King George Sheriff's Department, unless you all or the board asks to expand that, and then I think Linda would have to make that decision. This is just something to help the county with the officers' training. It's not designed to help the other officers in the region or other folks. So that's an unequivocal answer. Just then. I will also state unequivocally, we are bound by the county noise ordinance. There's no way in the world that a judge is going to find otherwise, but you defer to your legal counsel that particular issue. We're happy to have a condition that says we will be bound, because that is the law as it stands today, as I stand here. We had a great opportunity to meet with Mr. and Mrs. Brooks and a lot of their neighbors last night, and I appreciate them inviting us into their home and going through a lot of these issues. They were very concerned about potential training on Saturday. And we've offered Saturday to the Sheriff's Department only. That would have to be supervised by employees of the training center. That's just not a free-for-all. They can't come in. Since we've been here tonight, I've been talking with the captain, the police force. They actually don't want to do this on Saturday. So the way they qualify, and I know you all know this, but sheriff's officers are pretty strapped in the way they do their schedules, because they have to keep a certain amount of people on the road every day and at night. They've got court days to adhere to, so their schedules are pretty rigid, and they send their folks to the range Tuesdays to qualify now. So that's what we're hoping for, that they can fit them in on Tuesdays. Sheriff Giles was a little bit concerned about that in case they had a paying customer, so we offered to give them a Saturday as well. But in speaking with the captain, I think they do like 20 hours a year or something. It's not that much. So even if they were there on a Saturday, you're probably talking 5 or 6 Saturdays a year. That was a concern. The folks last night were also concerned about the rifle fire. And I think the captain told me they shoot a .226 round, which is a fairly light round, as you all know. But despite that, to mitigate that, Port Graham's going to buy suppressors, silencers for the rifles, so that should eliminate any of that rifle noise, and we're left with the pistol range. You'll hear from the range designer all of the noise mitigation, and it's frankly fascinating because the way they do these things with the walls and these high berms in the back and the shooting sheds, it essentially captures all of the noise except what goes up, and that'll keep going up unless there's low cloud cover, which then sometimes pushes it back down. But regardless, we still have to stay within that noise limitation. And I think we did give you all an acoustic study that was done, which anticipates that we will be within that decibel range at the property line, which is essentially what the law calls for. I was just trying to cover a couple things real quick, and Mr. Brooks mentioned a reversion of the zoning and/or the special exception. And again, I'm not going to tread on Kelly's turf on this one, but that is unenforceable and unlawful. Zoning and special exceptions run with the land, and there's some counties who will try to do that, and sometimes it makes people feel good, but I never believed in doing something that was unlawful. But again, I'm not your counsel, so you can ask her about that one. So I'd like to introduce Linda Carter, who's our project manager, and she's going to go a little more in depth about just some of the training elements. Would you like to speak? I'm sorry. Captain, I apologize.
No worries. Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. My name is Patrick Weston, captain of King George Sheriff's Office. I live at 4306 Allen View Lane. I'm speaking at this public hearing tonight on behalf of Sheriff Giles, who couldn't be with us in person. Sheriff Giles and the King George Sheriff's Office are in favor of the rezoning request of Port Graham Corporation and their special exemption request. If the requests are approved, this will open many doors for training for our office. As it stands right now, most of the training we conduct is outside of the county. This costs the deputies time traveling back and forth to training, not to mention the wear and tear on our issued vehicles. The safety training facility that is requesting this rezoning and special exemption request can support some of the training that would require us to leave the county. For instance, the qualifying range we currently use is private and owned here in King George. This range is nearing the end of life due to the homeowner getting up in age. When the end of life comes for us to use this range, we'll have to seek out another range, most likely outside of the county. We may even have to rent a range that's outside of the county. This safety training facility has proffered to allow us to use the facility if there are no scheduling conflicts with the safety training that they are providing. The safety training facility will provide us with an area for driver training, classrooms for instructional training, as well as much needed qualifying range, which we will need in the very near future. There will also be an area for an ATV and side-by-side training course. I'm asking you tonight to vote in favor of case number Z 2023-00151, rezoning request by Port Graham Corporation to rezone with proffers a 10-acre portion of the tax map parcel 31-14 located in the Rappahannock River settlement area from industrial to A1 limited agricultural. Also, case number Z 2023-00150, special exception request by Port Graham Corporation to allow training facility in the A1 limited agricultural zoning district on tax map parcel 31-14 located in the Rappahannock River settlement area. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is Linda Carter, and I work with Port Graham Corporation. Just want to say I'm grateful to be in front of you. I have sat here for months watching you guys conduct your business. I don't envy your workload, and I'm just grateful to have this opportunity to be in front of you finally. So Angela did pretty much my entire presentation, so I don't need to do much. That was very thorough, and I appreciate that. I will just go through a couple other slides and then offer time for questions. Carrie O'Neill has a few slides, our range design specialist, and any questions that Senator Stewart can answer as well. So, okay. I'm not going to be repetitive. But this is the Kenson Farm Training Facility. Okay. You left it on. Not working. Are you just going to do it? Okay. So project description, not to be repetitive, Kenton Farm Training Facility, proposed tax map 3114. We read through our description. I don't need to repeat it. Our emphasis on innovation, Kenton Farm Training Facility aims to impart the latest techniques, skills across diverse scenarios. We are committed as a company to, we are the end user of this facility. We are committed to operate the facility. We will be hiring a facilities manager and support staff. I will personally be the project manager for the contracts, and I will personally be overseeing all of the schedule for the contracts, which morphs a little bit into King George County Sheriff's Department. If there's a scheduling conflict, because our facility will be open Monday through Friday, we offered Saturday use only for King George County. Again, existing zoning, we went through that. There was a 10-acre parcel which is needing to be rezoned back from industrial to agricultural. That was part of the original mining permit when I think they had their weight station on that 10-acre parcel, which is why it had to be zoned industrial way back when. So this was a condition that the county gave us from day one, that we needed to change this back to agricultural. Planning Department, Legacy Engineering is our planners. Kenton Farm Investment is the owner. Applicant, Port Graham Corporation. Angela went through this as well. The proposed project aligns with the comprehensive plan. There will be no required use of public water or sewer, very low traffic impact. No, they said 38 trips, literally 3 to 4 van loads of students that will be coming at one time and leaving at the other time. The instructors will come in their own vehicles. I don't see those trips being that much, but that is what the county assessed for the trips. No public access, limited to instructors, maintenance, staff, deliveries, goods, students, designated government agencies, public safety personnel. Adjacent to the property, to the west and north, is an active sand and gravel mine. Basically on 3 sides is an active sand and gravel mine, and probably will be there for quite some time. Hours of operation during normal business hours. Vehicle noise is the same as passenger vehicles on public roads. There will be no racing, NASCAR, no mufflers that are souped up, no extra horsepower. There are no go-karts like Funland. They're purposely, those type of vehicles are purposely designed for noise, to add to the ambiance of what racing brings. We will be using, most of the trainings are done with SUV type vehicles that are normal vehicles that you would see on any roadway. Machines used on site, 2 Gator type all-terrain vehicles, really just for the staff. The adjacent quarry activity with the use of heavy equipment such as loaders, conveyors, track hose, dump trucks will create more noise than the proposed project, and currently does, and I think the trucks going down the road on Cleve Drive as well. Significant buffer distance to the nearest residential use, the gun range, driving course, and skid pad used at discrete intervals during course modulars. So basically, it's not like every modular will not be in constant use, they rotate. You've seen the general site plan. We can address any questions that you might have specifically on elements. For the sake of being repetitive, I'll just keep that up there, move through it. Access to the facility shall be from the existing ingress easement to Cleve Drive. We just actually widened that to 60 feet with proper drainage. So that is going to be good for us. It will also have aggregate material that will comply with the fire department and sheriffs for emergency. The hours of outdoor training element shall be from 7 a.m. until dusk, Monday through Friday, except in the case of state of emergency declared by a competent authority. The King George County Sheriff Department and Fire Rescue Department may utilize the training facility outside the hours of operation, limited to Saturdays only, no Sundays. The facility shall not be open to the general public. Access to the facility shall be limited to employees, facility deliveries. We've repeated that. The site shall be secured by fencing and a security gate. Fencing shall be located interior to any required buffers to adjacent properties. Landscaping materials and planting shall conform to the standards. The county zoning ordinance will be met. Final site plan, stormwater quality requirement. We can go through all of these. The existing sanitary sewer, we touched on that. Fire flow, we touched on that. Lighting of site lighting will be determined at final site plan. It's not a lighted facility. We're talking security lighting, not nighttime lighting. Historical buildings in place of burial, it is safe to say there are no known historic buildings, featured, or burial grounds on the site. The site has been mined. If we do stumble upon something, we would obviously turn it over to the proper King George County Historical Society, I guess. Maintenance, open space will be privately owned and maintained by the owners. Erosion sediment control, a two-phase erosion sediment control plan is to be prepared with the final site plan. All vegetative and structural erosion and sediment control practices will be constructed and maintained in accordance with the minimum standards and specifications of Virginia Erosion and Sediment Handbook. So I thought this was an interesting comparative slide. If you were to put the courthouse and the Rivercomb buildings with parking, then zoomed out at a 0.2 mile scale, just to give you an idea of what the size of the site is, that is what, just to give you a perspective, this is how it would fit on the Kenson property. We gained 7 acres during our actual survey. So that was done before the survey came back. But it's actually 207 acres. So the elements we had gone through already: 50-yard pistol-only gun range, 1.5 mile driving paved course, 3/4 mile unimproved driving course, outdoor training canopy, tactical driving skid pad, and approximate 7,500 square foot building. All training will be managed and operated by individuals and agencies with trained, accredited instructors and/or federal agents. Individual contracts will be secured for the training of the local, state, and federal agencies, as well as potential other entities that offer low-impact safety and survival training in various capacities. I am going to let Carrie come up in a second and talk about the gun range, and he's got about 4 slides. I think a lot of your questions will most likely be directed to him. Carrie, you want to just,
I'll let you use the mouse.
Okay, yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commission. My name's Kerry O'Neill. I come from Eagle, Idaho, and I'm very excited about this project. I've been in the shooting range industry since 1984. I started with being a competitive shooter, competing for a spot on the U.S. Olympic shooting team. I worked for Weatherby Firearms. After that, I worked for the National Rifle Association as part of this, and then the U.S. Olympic Training Center VP of Operations. My passion has always been hunting and shooting since I was about this high, and I was fortunate enough to turn it into a career. I'm now 63 years old, and my passion is still shooting ranges. A little bit about our company, which is TRS Range Services. We've been in business just about 25 years. We've constructed a little over 300 municipality type of ranges. We've designed well over 1,000 ranges in my career. We've done majority of the work for the FBI.
We have worked with Secret Service, Special Forces, Sheriff's Department, Police Department, county agencies, emergency agencies, nuclear power plants. And when we look at a shooting range, one of the things we do is, for most people that would not know how to build a shooting range, is where do you start? And I get these calls frequently is, I own this land, how am I gonna start this? Where do we go first? Well, the first thing we wanna make sure is that all the rounds stay within the property. That's number one. The safety of the staff goes along with this. We have sound mitigation issues. We have environmental concerns, whether it be the heavy metals within the calibers themselves or sound. And then how is this going to impact the area around it? And a little bit about this site that's very different than any other site we have built is an industry standard right now is your impact berm is 20 feet high. And I actually brought a tape with me, and I'm guessing this ceiling height here is about 10 feet high, maybe just a hair more. The impact berm associated with this range is 30 feet high with a 10-foot high ballistic wall on top of it. So 4 times the height of the ceiling in this building. And majority of the shooting of this range by these students will be anywhere from 3 to 5 yards. They will also do some minimal qualification at 25 and 50 yards, but majority of the shooting will be done closer than you or I. So imagine a berm and a wall 4 times the height of this is what they're going to be shooting in. It's 3-sided. The wall itself is treated with a fibrous material. Typically, it's called, it's an Excelsior product used with basalt. And basalt is a rock wool product that is used. It's fire resistant. It's actually rock, but helps absorb sound. And if you go into a movie theater, you'd probably see this Excelsior looking product on the wall. This is what will be placed on the wall itself behind the range. When I originally talked to Linda, she said, what is the standard shooting berm heights? And I said, the impact berms have changed from 10 feet to 20 feet. The side berms are between 8 and 10 feet high. And she said, it's not high enough. And I said, it gets very expensive because as you go up, the footprint doubles as you go out. And she said, I need it to be higher than that. I want to make sure the residents around there and the people here feel very good about this project, and we know we're doing everything we can. So I said, okay, let's make the back berm 20 feet, the side berms 10 feet high. We've talked to some of the neighbors. There was some concerns of sound. Now the side berms are 20 feet high, which is unheard of in this industry. The rear berm is 30 feet high, and the wall that's shown there is actually a ballistic wall that's 10 feet higher than that. The canopy structure underneath there has the same sound absorbing product underneath it. So imagine shooting in this room, which is about the size of the range. Each one of these lanes is 5 feet in width. There's 15 lanes, so a total of 75 feet. But think of this room, but you're gonna go up 20 feet on the sides, 40 feet in the back. There is no range, to my knowledge, that supports this in the US. And I have been to thousands of ranges in my career. Linda Carter and her group has done above and beyond any range design that we've ever looked at. And by the way, it's very expensive to go up. Every time you do that, the bill just keeps doubling. And she has cut any type of concerns when it comes to the safety and sound for the community. She has put them first in this. It excites me. This project is unheard of in the country. I'm the contractor that rebuilt Quantico recently for the FBI. We did their ballistic labs, we did their training, the academy ranges, we did the HRT ranges. This would be an example of the wall that you would see and our bullet trap. The bullet trap itself is granular tire material. It's ground up in 3/4 inch chunks. And I invented this about 30 years ago and patented it. It's now the preferred choice of material that's used on impact ranges throughout the world. And what it does, as the bullet projectile goes in it, the bullet starts to tumble and loses its energy very quickly, and hence eliminates rounds from skipping out of the range, which in the past has been a very large problem. The other thing it does is mitigate fragmentation. And fragmentation causes lead dust, and we're trying to mitigate that. In this system, there is also designed a filtration system, so all the water that goes through this actually goes through a clarifier. This is above and beyond EPA requirements or RCRA requirements pertaining to ranges. We can go to the next slide. I think I talked about that. One more. Is that it? Okay.
Do you have any questions?
But yes, do you have any questions about? Okay.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. Okay.
So our elements again, maximum speed 50 miles an hour, Land Cruiser SUV type vehicles, low impact driving course, inclement weather, maneuver tactics. Those are the type of things that will be done. The driving course will simulate, the unapproved driving course will simulate third world country unapproved roads, no racing. All vehicles will be licensed and inspected for use on state roadways. All vehicles to include stock components will include stock components and standard tires, no special modifications. Adjacent quarry activity use heavy equipment creates more noise than this proposed project. Significant buffers, 0.3 miles to the nearest residential. Classroom training, the overall safety and survivability, country evacuation procedure. This is an example of the type of trainings that are low impact that we are going after. Natural disaster, man-made disaster, survival skills training, no dormitories on site, not open to the public, break rooms and offices for staff and training, temporary modular classrooms. We do have a portion on our site plan for that in the event that our classroom building isn't finished in the interior. We have put in a place marker for temporary modular classrooms, and I believe they need to be removed within like 90 days or something to that effect. 6 months, okay. I hope our building is not going to be 6 months. That is the concept drawing of the building. We're using a steel building company called Echo Steel. I just really like these guys. They're out of California. They do a lot of humanitarian work. They do a lot of shelter work. I just like them. I like how their buildings are. I like how they offer structural design. They're not just a steel manufacturer that's going to drop their building on a pallet. They helped with the interior layout as well. This is the exact design of what if this project gets approved, I will call them tomorrow and tell them this is, go ahead and start it. We have a tactical driving skid pad. It's an area that is inundated with water to simulate hydroplaning condition for Land Cruiser SUV type vehicles, to familiarize students with skidding conditions and vehicle control. Oh, we don't want to see him yet. Hang on. Okay, the outdoor canopy is basically an area that is a covered area outside that types of it could help with inclement weather. Types of training are tactics and structure, entry, exit, utilizing these portable SIMS type buildings, how to administer basic health, emergency procedures, demonstration of how security forces would inspect your vehicle when you're entering or exiting US embassies, how to safely react in a carjacking situation, how to start a generator if power outages. I know some of these sound basic, but they are basic skills, low impact training that we are after. The purpose is to provide an area where various security emergency type scenarios can be demonstrated in an all-weather environment. Again, we've committed, Port Graham Corporation is dedicated to establishing a meaningful partnership with King George County, actively supporting its public safety mission and ensuring the well-being of its citizens. Our commitment extends to offering essential resources to King George County Sheriff's Office for the enhancement of their mission-critical skills. We are pleased to provide access to top-tier training facility, including firearm range, unimproved road course, defensive driving skid pad, and well-equipped classrooms. This collaboration not only fosters professional development, but also translates into significant financial benefits for the county and its residents. The utilization of these state-of-the-art facility results in an annual cost savings to the county of $317,000, demonstrating our dedication to promoting efficient and cost-effective public safety initiatives in the region. I did break down how we got to that figure, and this is, I'm not saying that King George County spends this right now. If we were charging King George County to train at our facility for the hours that they need to qualify for their firearms and for classroom or for the off-road course, this is what we would charge them. We are obviously not charging them. So that is how I came to that figure. That's per deputy, $7,444. Port Graham's corporate values. Port Graham Corporation core business principles are focused on delivering the highest possible value of schedule and on budget to our clients and partners. We consistently look to exceed customer requirements, maintaining culture of excellence, honest and transparent communication, and the spirit of genuine cooperation. We are a small 8A Alaskan Native corporation. We are not an arm of a big contracting company. We are a legit small 8A Alaskan Native corporation. There are about 8 of us that represent a village in Alaska, about 145 miles southwest of Anchorage, with 147 people. That is a picture of Senator Murkowski and our CEO, John Shepard, and some natives that are on the board. Port Graham, I just basically read that. We were formed under the Alaskan Native Settlement Act of 1971 to represent the Suapeg people inhabiting the Kenai Forges, which is, again, a peninsula about 147 miles southwest of Anchorage. I have to answer to these people on the land. I have answered to these people on the land. We have board members that ask me questions on how they're excited about the reclamation of mining land to repurpose it. That's what these people are about. I so love working for this group of people. And I hope that I've demonstrated to the community the integrity of our company. Oops, there's Linda who needs some makeup. All right. So if you have any questions, I'm going to ask Senator Stewart to answer any questions. Carrie can answer questions in reference to noise. I think you have a noise. We did do an acoustical study based on some models that you have with you, and also you have an entire packet. I know I sent one to each of you to just hopeful preparation prior to this meeting, and you have it with you now. I personally took this training about 20 years ago, and I did it in Arlington, Virginia, when it was all classroom. And so the training itself has evolved. You know, this is a training that is for support staff, for wives, for analysts, people going overseas to support agents or such diplomats that are going overseas. I personally used 2 of the elements that we were trained, and one of them was a car cut me off and I had to do a car maneuver. And another one was we were overseas when 9/11 happened, and we were evacuated from our houses. My children were evacuated from their school. It was scary. And this was a vital part of me kind of holding it together while that was happening. So there you go.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Okay, just a couple.
Yeah. Then you're gonna do public hearing and then questions.
Well, okay.
Okay, so we're going to open the floor for public comment, and we're going to take this one case at a time. So we're opening up the floor for public comment on case number Z20230015, which is the rezoning from industrial to A1. Okay, Ms. Dines, anyone online? Oh, go on.
Yes.
Yeah, please. Yes, please.
The one thing that was not, I'm Judy Brooks, and we invited these folks to our house last night, and I thought it was very productive, and they tried really hard to answer all the questions. We live in a community that is outside the realm that we were notified that this was coming, and one of our our homeowners saw the sign. This is a dead-end road. We would never go past the mine down there. We didn't know until last Friday night. So I thought we did really well to get this pulled together. We appreciated that Ms. Carter was willing to come up and talk to us as a group. There are 33 lots in our subdivision, and my poor husband is the HOA president. So he is ultimately the complaint department in Berry Plains. And once this went out that this was coming, we heard from many people, let's just say that. But they tried really hard last night to answer our questions. The one or two things that were not answered last night to my satisfaction, and they may think they did, but I didn't think they did. And I would ask all of you, if any of you have ever heard of Brendan's Law. Anybody have ever heard of Brendan's Law? We lived in a community in Midlothian, Virginia, and Brendan was 7 years old when he was going to a fireworks display, and he was killed in a parking lot walking with his dad. And people couldn't believe it had happened. When the sheriff's department eventually figured out what had happened, he had been killed by a bullet coming out of the sky. It was a 40-millimeter bullet that was coming down that had been fired into the air. And I know that everybody that goes to this facility is supposed to be a professional. The instructors are professionals. In my opinion, everybody that handles a handgun should be a professional. They're not always, or this would not have happened. The other thing that I will tell you is, and that happened in 2014, I believe. It's a cold case now, and I don't believe that they will ever figure out who shot that bullet into the air. You can look it up on the internet. We lived through that, and it was horrific. The other thing that happened in our community was there was a lady that lived across, she still lives there, across the street from us, and she was out in her backyard pulling weeds. I don't know what she was doing, but she heard the bullet come by her head. It lodged in her crabapple tree, and when she is not a shrinking violet, she immediately called the sheriff's department, who responded immediately. They tracked down the problem, and the people that caused that bullet to come into her yard were fooling around on the mine. And you all go, well, that's just arbitrary, and it couldn't happen again, and whatever. That is a matter of public record. The sheriff responded. They found the men that were doing that, and they ran them out of the mine. The point is that it was only from here to that lady right there where the bullet went. It came across Cleve Drive. It came through the row of houses that are along Cleve Drive. It came up her backyard and landed 10 feet from her. So the fact is that a rifle bullet can carry that far. And I know that Ms. Carter has addressed all of her sides, top, everything. When I asked last night why we couldn't put this inside a building that would make everyone safe around that, she explained to me that it was too expensive. And all I would say to you is, how much is a 7-year-old worth? And could it ever happen again? And I would tell you that 10 feet is not very far to miss. And so I'm grateful that it didn't happen again. I've been told that one of the reasons that the expense of that indoor facility would be $20 million. Think about that, $20 million to make a 50-foot range that's as wide as 75 feet, I think is what you said. 15 times 5 is, you do the math.
Well,
Is that the land has already been mined and it may not, or probably was not reclaimed correctly. And therefore you can't build buildings as easily. It's harder once the land has been mined. So those are the 3 things that I would ask you. She tried really hard. I just didn't feel comfortable, and I wanted each of you to understand what it would feel like if a stray bullet went someplace besides where it was supposed to be.
Thank you. Have any others?
So I'd like to
Jump up there quick. Mr. Chairman of the board, I appreciate your concerns. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. So, you know, that's a very real thing to me as well, but they didn't bring the B team here. That was something that they have been very good at from the start. I mean, they have the literal best in the business. I grew up on a farm actually in the western part of the state, and I mean, hunting has been an integral part of my life as well. So, I mean, I understand weapons and the range that they can go, and the proposal that they have put together here is very solid, and I have no concerns, and we have the closest residents, in my opinion, that's to this facility. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Steins, anyone online? I know we did that before, but we didn't finish.
No, the sheriff is online though, and he says if there are any questions, he could answer some questions as well.
Okay, thank you.
So I think,
If you could have your name
sorry,
and
Elizabeth Hartfield. I live in Berry Plain, 6284 Berry Plain. Sorry, they renumbered our house. Anyway, I live over in Berry Plain, actually, the house. So I think my husband spent his entire career doing all of these things that that they're talking about training people to do. I've been to one of these before. I think as a resident of the neighborhood, my concern is only not having the use of rifles. I know that the people that go to these classes are not actually trained professionals. They are the spouses. They are people who don't really want to ever end up in these situations, but unfortunately do. So that's all I have to say.
thank you. Okay, any others? If not, we'll close public comment on case number Z 2023-00151, and we'll open it for.
Mr. Chair, I have a letter to be read into the record.
Okay, then we will not close public comment.
I can wait till the previous one. They didn't specify which case.
We can do it now, and
This is from Mr. Craig DeBernard. He's a neighboring property owner. He wrote, "We are vegetable farmers and have been farming in King George for 3 generations. Currently, for the last 25 years, this has included the land near the proposed site. We feel this rezoning and special exception would be a very positive project for many reasons, some of which include the following. The Kenston Farm was used for farming many years ago. The gravel company has since mined it for sand and gravel and have completed that operation. The Kenston Farm is perfect for this training facility because it will make use of a land that would otherwise lay fallow. By allowing this, our community will be helping assist in supporting local law enforcement, as well as federal agencies receiving top-notch training right in our backyard. This facility will bring additional revenue to our community and thus will help local businesses in our community. As our county is growing faster than ever, we feel it would be a great asset to our county." Thank you.
thank you. Okay, now we will close public comment on case number Z2023000151, and we'll open it up for discussion.
I just have a couple, questions, if you don't mind, please. Could you give us a general idea of the frequency and duration of this training? Is this going to be a facility that is used, 5 days a week, 52 weeks out of the year? Is this a sporadic training facility? I haven't heard any sort of information about that.
Yes, yes, and yes. I mean, they hoped that they would use it Monday through Friday every day. They certainly wouldn't do it during holidays, but you first have to build a site and then you have to secure the contract to train it. And they are only going after government agencies, either federal, state, or local, to do the support staff training. So it's a matter of the contracts that they can get to do this. And I wish I could tell you that we hope that they use it every day.
That's fine. So the expectation is that this can grow to an everyday activity Monday through Friday.
They want to be profitable and
That's fine.
as well as provide this training. Yes, sir.
My other question is, there was a statement in there about the sheriff was able to use a facility out of the hours of operation. Does that include outside of the 7 a.m. to dusk hours? Or is that just the Saturday that has been discussed?
It's a Saturday. And so what they offered, what the applicant offered, was for them to be able to do their training within normal business hours. But if by chance they are really busy and they can't get them in on the day that they want, then they offered for them to be able to do only the sheriffs on a Saturday.
That's fine.
Nobody else.
I was just clarification of the way it was phrased of outside of the hours of operation made me think they might come in and do nighttime training if they need to do that sort of facility.
I think that was paraphrased. I don't know if that was.
I wrote it down exactly the way it was phrased, out of the hours of operation.
And it could be. I thought the condition was on Saturdays, but it could have been, condition could have been written that way.
There was an additional phrase that talked about it Saturday only, not Sunday, but it did not qualify the hours.
Yeah, draft condition 5 states the King George County Sheriff's Department and Fire and Rescue Department may utilize the training facility outside the hours of operation, period.
Do you want to change that or?
I believe.
We want to make it available to them when they're
I understand. I'm just trying to be conscious of the people that are living in the area, and for them to start having to deal with after dark gunfire is certainly a little more concerning. Having some of that happening around my house periodically with people out doing target shooting on adjacent property.
Our new noise ordinance prohibits gunfires after dark.
Okay.
There's no anticipation that there'd be any gunfire.
If it's already covered, pardon me, I'm a relatively new member here on the board. If it's already covered by the noise ordinance and restricted, then if we hold them to the noise ordinance, then
If I understand
that
it,
concern.
correct me if I'm wrong, it says, I was just there.
Those were my questions. Thank you.
The lawful discharge of firearms, except that this exemption shall not apply to the discharge of firearms and non-hunting activities during the nighttime. So it's my understanding you can't shoot after dark.
They're not going to nighttime fire. He has confirmed it. I don't think the facility's going to allow nighttime fire anyway. That liability's too great. It's not going to happen.
I have some questions on the rezoning. I'd like to hear everybody on the commission's questions and remarks on the zoning case. I understand that this is getting very confused and conflated with the special exception use, but we're being asked to vote on two separate items. So I want to start with the zoning, the rezoning case, and I'd like to hear everybody speak to that before we move on to the next. First question is the proffer statement. Proffer number one, the use and development of the property shall be for the training facility. Mr. Stewart, you said earlier that zoning and special exceptions run with the land
Yes, sir.
in perpetuity regardless of ownership unless the board takes some action, correct?
Until it's redone by the board. That's
So my question is, why would you encumber this land with this special exception use only? And before you answer that, item number two is other rights, other by right uses. That kind of negates the first proffer, doesn't it? Any R1 use, or I'm sorry, any A1 use, you're holding as a proffer, but number one says it's for the training facility special exception. I'm a little confused by this.
And I apologize, so am I. I'm having a hard time following you on that. I can tell you the reason they're asking for the rezoning for this specific purpose is because that's all they want to do there. And I didn't really understand your question beyond that.
Okay. I just think that's contradictory. You're proffering, in other words, you're asking the county to enter an agreement with you that the use will be restricted to a training facility, correct? In perpetuity.
We're only rezoning 10 acres back that was industrial.
Correct.
So we're
I
restricting
understand.
the 10 acres and the other 200 or a little less remains just agriculture.
Okay, well, that brings
Does
us
that
to
answer your question?
a little bit. It kind of gets me to my next question, which is if the 1998 proffer that after 15 and a half years, this was to be applied for, you're 10 years late, and that's fine. I'm glad you're here. But why isn't that your only request? Why are you putting these proffers out there when really all you need to do is make this request for?
So the mining company owned it, and when they had it rezoned, my understanding is there was a request to revert it back to agricultural land. When my client chose this site, they wanted to do this project, and we're just asking it be rezoned back to ag land, and then a special exception for these particular purposes. And we've offered proffers that we think support the integrity of their project and what they want to do, so that you see fully what they want to do here, and there are no hidden balls or anything. I really can't follow your question. I apologize.
I'm sorry, I thought it was pretty obvious. You said that zoning and special exceptions run with the land in perpetuity. Proffer number one states that this is to be a training facility special exception. So isn't that encumbering the property with only that use in perpetuity?
Yes, sir. That's
It
the
is.
whole point. Because that's all they want to do there.
In perpetuity, regardless of whether the business works out, whether they convey the property to another owner, that is locked in, is it not?
I don't want to give you legal advice, and you may want to ask your counsel, but it runs with the land. Zoning and special exceptions don't run with you and I. It's not personal to a person.
Right.
It runs with the land, and that's just the law. I don't know any other way to answer it than that.
Okay.
So-
Well, can you answer number 2, other rights and any other by right uses permitted in A1? That's also being proffered. Does anybody understand why I'm confused?
I have the same question, but I had it worded a little differently. Is my question basically is if we give you the special exception for this land, would you still be able to do A1 things by right on it without coming back to us?
So can we hold that one to the next case? This one is just for the rezoning, not the special exception.
So I think the reason, I think I understand what you're trying to say. I think the reason they're saying that is they're rezoning to A1, which they're allowed to do because of their other agreement 15, 25 years ago, whatever that was. Right, they're required to do. So it's rezoned to A1, but they're then going to ask for a special exception for the training facility. So they listed it as the training facility or any A1 use. If the training facility didn't work out, then the next people would either have to do a training facility or an A1 use. So they're leaving it open, but they can't just ask to go back to A1. Well, I guess you could. They're being upfront with it and saying, we're going to put a training facility on it. I don't think there's anything odd there. I think it's just, they're stating what they're doing, why, on top of. They could have come back and said, we wanted A1 and then we wanted in 2 different steps.
Well, they've got a 2-step process, and they're just being very transparent about what they're doing.
Is there another way you'd like us to do it? I don't understand. We're
I'm okay.
trying to
I'm
make
good.
sure that we're putting everything on the table and it's very transparent and you know what we're after. That's the reason we've done it.
Well, I just think those first 2 items are, one negates the other. I mean, and my question is, why are we having this conversation at all when all you really needed to do was apply for that 10-acre reversion back to A1, which I would support. I mean, you don't need any proffers at all.
Well, I think this is a case where the 2 are related, but from my point of view, we've got a 10-acre parcel sitting inside of an A1 area that was changed in the past so they could do mining. Mining is now over. Restoring it back to A1 makes all the sense in the world, and it's consistent with our comprehensive plan. All right, so I'm perfectly fine with it. I understand your point. They could have come before us and just said, we just want to change it to A1. They're linking the 2 together for us by saying, and after it's reverted to A1, this is what we intend to do with the whole property. So keeping them separate, I'm all in favor of the rezoning or returning that industrial 10-acre site back to A1. But as long as the reclamation occurs, which it is required by law, so somebody's going to do it. They're going to be held responsible for doing it. So I'm fine with that. Now, once it's all A1, they are simply asking for an exception. But with that is they can do everything that is by right in an A1 zone, regardless of what they put on it. Some other owner could come in later. Well, they don't have to proffer anything. The next applicant comes in and says, it's zoned A1. It's got this special exception construction on it, but if I rip it all away, I can still do all the A1 stuff I want to do.
Can you?
Yes.
Can you? Because item number 1 says it's proffered to be special, proffer number 1
So
says
the proffer number 2 says other by right uses are permitted. So if the first application carries and these proffers are accepted or recommended to be accepted by the Board of Supervisors, I should say, if they're ultimately accepted by the Board of Supervisors, they would still need the second part. They'd still need the special exception to operate what they intend to. But I hear both sides of the issue. That's why one of your draft motions was if you have concerns about how the proffers are framed, that could be a basis for denial. but it doesn't bootstrap you, in other words, into approving the special exception. It still has to be approved as step 2. So the applicant's kind of taking a slight risk there, and that this is their intended use. If they get the rezoning, they can use it for other agricultural uses, but they cannot have the training facility unless they get the special exception.
I'd like to ask my question again, because the proffers are related to the first case that we are discussing tonight. So my question is, then the A1 uses that are in the proffers that could happen, it says in the number 1 proffer was that they would be subject to the zoning requirements that are in effect at the date of the acceptance of the proffer. So we're talking about basically grandfathering all of our old zoning ordinances for A1 a couple weeks before all of the new ones go into effect. Is that correct? And is that just for A1 future uses?
So the drafting of proffer 1 says zoning requirements in effect as of the acceptance of this proffer as to the training facility. So you are correct that they are, by proffer, they would be grandfathering themselves to whatever the zoning ordinances are in effect as to the training facility. But proffer 2, other by right uses, is not qualified. So if for whatever reason this business doesn't come to pass, any other A1 uses would follow the zoning ordinance in effect at the time that use is actually made of the property.
The last sentence
Just-
again?
Can I interject one thing here? If you don't like that proffer, just recommend it without it.
I just want an understanding of it. If I'm not clear about the understanding, it's not whether I like it or not. I want to know what it says, in terms of I might be able to understand.
Proffer number 3, let me just finish with the proffers. Proffer number 3 is basically just a reiteration of how the training facility is going to operate. Number 4 does the same by reference. So those are basically duplicates. Number 5, no mining activity shall be permitted on the property. Mining isn't, once it becomes R1, mining is not a by right use anyway. That's a special exception use only. I'm not sure how that's a proffer that we should agree to.
Again, we were trying to be transparent and giving the county what we thought they wanted. If you don't like the proffers, then make a recommendation without them.
Okay.
When we initially met with your former director, this was the path that we were suggested to proceed on. And in my mind, it didn't hurt us to go down this path. We could have gone another path, but I didn't see anything wrong with this. And so obviously we took the path that that initial director proposed.
Okay. Well, I mean, I haven't heard anybody weigh in on this yet, but I don't think I can support these proffers as written simply because they don't make any sense to me. I am absolutely in favor of the rezoning. However, I am sorry we're having this argument because I'd love to say yes to it and be done with it. And I would have by now if it wasn't for these proffers. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I could support a motion that's based upon pursuant to adhering to the 1998 requirement and just be done with it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I did want to address Mrs. Brooks's question. And I am very familiar with that case that they filed a bill called Brandon's Law. And what happened, as I recall, there were, I guess I would call them criminals in the city of Richmond. And they were shooting guns up in the air. And this child actually died as a result of a bullet hitting him in the head. They shot straight up in the air. And it's like against all the laws of averages. And we deliberated over that, bills, and trying to figure out ways to deal with a situation like that. But ultimately, it was criminals and it was criminal activity. And I think the same thing applies to the the issue that she was talking about on the mine where the bullet landed in. And I just want to point out to you all that in our situation, this is going to be supervised by professionals at all times. People aren't allowed to go in there. They're not allowed to use it at will. They're supervised by professionally trained folks who will make sure everything is done in a responsible manner.
Will you have 24/7 security surveillance in there?
I know they have security. I don't know if you have people 24/7, but it's fenced.
I was referring to, camera surveillance, security camera surveillance.
Yes, but I'm not sure they'll have people patrolling it at all times. And again, with the rifles, we only offered that to the sheriff's office to do their qualifying. Port Graham won't be training anybody on rifles. That's just to allow the sheriff's office to do their qualifying so they don't have to go out of town to do it. Because we understood that issue would be a concern for folks.
Any other questions, discussion?
I just want to make a comment. Normally, I find myself agreeing with my colleague a whole lot, but right now, these proffers don't bother me at all for the rezoning. They clarify a few things. Maybe it's not necessary, but they clarify a few things. I mean, they mentioned that, yes, they're still retaining the right for all A1, by right activities. They make a comment about they're not going to do any mining. They don't have any intentions of doing any mining, but there might be mining-like activity for the reclamation effort so that it's just covered, no question then.
Sure.
The rest
But
of
it's a proffer. What you're suggesting belongs in the narrative.
Sometimes I find myself thinking of proffers as what are they offering the county? In this case, they're not really offering the county anything. They're just making it clear what they're going to be doing so that it's above board and transparent. So again, I don't have any problems with the rezoning request. In fact, I think it's the right thing to do. I agree. 15 or so years beyond the fact. I'm glad it's being taken care of. It cleans up a little issue and we can put it behind us. So I'm in favor of going ahead and, moving forward on the request for the rezoning, because whether this project goes ahead or not, the rezoning is still a good thing.
Just let me clarify. The issue is, it's under the heading proffers. They're not proffers. They're basically just, as Mr. Stewart himself has said, they're just doing it for the sake of transparency. Then therefore it is part of the narrative of the project. They aren't proffers. So do we make a motion to recommend with proffers?
Well, but I think my belief is that when we see proffers come in on almost all projects, they proffer up what they're going to do if the proffer is approved, if the exception is approved or the rezoning is approved. One of their proffers is telling us what they're going to do with it. And so we know how it's going to be used. We had this same issue when we were talking about data centers, because remember at the beginning, they didn't want to tell us what they were going to use the property for after it was rezoned. So eventually we got to the point where they proffered what they were going to do with it. That's what these folks are doing. So I'm perfectly fine with it.
They didn't proffer that. They illustrated it in a plan. They made proffers to the fire department. They made proffers to the schools. Those were the proffers.
So again, one of the things that I've learned over the years is whatever conversation we have in this room, if it's not put in the form of a proffer or a condition, it doesn't mean squat. It's nice that they say it, but it's not enforceable. So again, they put some things out in writing as a proffer or a condition so that they're bound to them. And I'm perfectly happy with that. So again, I'd like to just move forward.
Now I feel like I'm arguing on behalf of the applicant because they're proffering a special use condition in perpetuity. but that's
Well,
fine, if that's the way.
Yeah, but it's sort of like the mining one. Somebody asked for a rezoning to do mining years ago. The mining is complete.
Right.
Now, the next party who's going to own that parcel comes in and says, I don't need it and I don't want it as an industrial parcel. I want to change it back to A1 because then I can do what I want on A1 property with this exception.
That's what's driving me crazy, is the proffered condition of that mining rezoning was that it will revert after 15.5 years. That's all that was ever required.
So, hold on, if I may, there's not a requirement that we vote on this one first. I mean, even the numbering, it's 150 and then 151, and we're looking at 151 first. Do you want to go to 150 first and look at that one, open it, and then go back to vote?
We can approach it either way.
And there's nothing to prohibit it, and that might offer some refreshing clarity or additional clarification, or we might just get additional insight.
Yep.
So let's move forward.
All right, so we're gonna hold off on any kind of motion for 00151. So yeah, case number Z2023005150, special exception request by Port Graham Corporation to allow a training facility in A1 Limited Agricultural Zone District on tax map parcel 3114 located in the Rappahannock River Settlement Area. And we will open this case up for public hearing. If you would come to the microphone, state your name, your address, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Mr. Dines, anyone online?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right, so I will close public comment on case number Z 2023-00150 and open it up for discussion.
I just have a question for the applicant. Ms. Carter, could you give us a little background on how many of these facilities Port Graham Corporation operates today, its history in this regard? And if you would mind telling us whether or not you've had any disputes with neighboring property owners or threatened legal action, et cetera, in any of these other facilities that you've operated. Thank you.
No, we have not, and no, we have not.
You can tell us how many, for example.
We have not. This is the first time we have developed a training center. So I actually think
do you
there's-
operate any that have been developed by others?
Our staff of, our Port Graham employee staff is basically all ex-federal agents, retired federal agents. So in their capacity of their previous work, they have 30, 40 plus years in doing such. Our company has various different government contracts, so we have experience in that, in compliance and such technology. This is the first time we are the end user developing a training center, which I actually think is a little bit of an advantage because I personally have done development my whole career, and I think it's an advantage just overkilling it, as Carrie said, on some things. But yeah.
Well, thank you for that. And lastly, again, I just want to express my appreciation for your willingness to be very clear about complying with the King George noise ordinance. Can we expect to see that inserted into the 21 or now maybe 22 conditions in this document?
Again, I don't purport to give you all legal advice, but we would accept that if that was a condition of the recommendation for the board. Typically, if that's another condition, the planning commission would say a motion with all the conditions, however you want to phrase it, and an additional condition that they be bound by the county noise ordinance.
Yeah, personally, I know it may be a little bit kind of belts and suspenders on this, given that it's probably required by law anyway, but over time, memories may fade, situations change. I take to heart my colleagues' remarks about what isn't in writing necessarily can be debated. So
if you just include that extra condition in your motion, we accept that. And
If we can get a consensus here, then we should start a list on what to include in the motion, don't you think?
I think I also heard along with that was with regard to rifle usage, the applicability of silencers, and those would, okay.
flash suppressors, and they're fine. I'm sorry, I was a Marine. We call them
Silencer suppressors, right?
Silencers. They agreed to be bound by a condition to use silencers on the rifle training for the sheriff's office. And that's the only allowable rifle training is the sheriff's office. Correct?
Well, I concur with Mr. Fox. I would like to see that. I would like to see that included in the motion.
Anything else that we want to add to that
I
list at the moment?
certainly concur with that. I concur with the comment about including also about using suppressors on rifles used on the range. I would love to see something in there that puts in writing that, you know, the facility is Monday through Friday, with the exception that the sheriff's office may use it on Saturday. Okay, because that's.
Can we add hours of operation to that?
Same hours of operation as the daytime, you know, that it's 7 to dusk.
Well, yeah, but
No, it's fine. We could add that in.
I think we should, because of all the paper I've seen, and some of this I've read 6 times, there are some inconsistencies with how they present the hours of operation. 7 to sunset, I've seen public safety exception to hours, completely open-ended. The slideshow we saw tonight brought up something new, which is normal business hours, no Sundays. I would like hours of operation. They start at 7, fine. I would say 7 to an hour before sunset. Dusk is kind of an ambiguous term, and I hate ambiguous terms in this stuff.
Mr. Chairman, we would accept a condition regarding the Saturday use for the sheriffs if you'd rather phrase it that way. I want to get that on the record. We are agreeable to that condition.
Yes, I would like to see it phrased that way. I think it's a little ambiguous with the out of the hours of operation, if we clarified that the sheriff is the only user on a Saturday. And that they don't. I know there's other things that we've already said that they can't do things, you know, they can't fire rifles at dark. Well, we're adding a thing about the noise ordinance. We're adding some things as belts and suspenders to these conditions anyway. If we were just to clarify that language a little bit, I'll leave it to legal or someone better than my West Virginia grammar to come up with the proper phrasing of that. That's my general thoughts.
A few questions for the applicant. Fuel tanks, we have fuel tanks on site, or? You're fueling multiple vehicles, I would guess, to do this, or?
Good question.
So, to my knowledge, the trainings that we're after will be using up to 5 SUVs. I don't see the need to have fuel tank to fuel 5 SUVs and 2 Gators.
Okay, so no fuel tanks on site?
I don't want to answer no, but I don't see the need for that.
If you do, would it be possible to say you'd commit to have them buried subterranean tanks?
Whatever it takes to make you guys happy.
Hold on.
I'm not, I was just,
We're getting, yeah.
I just, if I could, that's kind of problematic when you bury those tanks.
right, yeah. I'm not, I was just wondering if there's plans for fuel tanks in
They
there.
have to get a permit for that if they do.
Right.
And it, again, I think that's governed by DEQ at a minimum. So I think they would have to get any proper permits if they did do that.
Okay, and on your tax analysis, you had the 2 gators and you had no vehicles. Are the vehicles registered somewhere else, or?
I had that question too, because it said all vehicles would be inspected so that they would be road worthy.
So the vehicles come with the agencies. They provide them. So if we secure a contract, they come with the agencies.
Okay.
We're not providing those vehicles. Those are the type of vehicles that these type of trainings use.
They bring their own vehicles with
Bring
them?
their own, yeah.
Okay. On the road, was there specific, so I actually drove to the property.
Were you the guy today?
Yes.
You were that guy.
I got
was that guy.
alerted from the mining guy. You gotta have access.
Right.
So,
Right, so I drove in, I don't think the outside piece of property was marked, the inside piece, is it the second sign? You go to the crossroads and then the second sign? Is that the beginning of the property?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So all that just looked like it was,
I've
so
got
you
your
guys
license
have,
plate, your white truck, I got it all.
wow, there you go. So you haven't actually, so on that looked like whatever had been done a while ago. Is that
So-
flat field there?
Yes,
Okay, is where you're working. Okay, and the road standard up to there, they're gonna keep,
that's the
that mine
easement.
stays open.
Yeah, that's the easement, that's the road that will be improved to the standards that we described. It will be 60 feet wide, it'll have proper drainage, it'll have proper aggregate material, it will be maintained by the mine as long, our easement says this, it's filed, it was recorded Monday. The mine will maintain it through mining activities, and then we take it over once mining activities cease on the northern part of the property. But it's their responsibility.
That's part of an agreement, that's part of a
That's our
recorded
that's
agreement?
recorded easement, yep.
Great.
Okay, so that will be done, I guess I don't know how to, I guess it'll be a gravel surface that a fire truck can make it down.
Yes, that's what we came to that agreement in the easement, yes. And that's based on the comments from Chief Moody.
Okay. All right. Rifles will be noise compliant, we already went there. State of emergency was listed in your hours, or state of emergency as a blanket statement.
Well,
You train for around the world, so there's several states of emergency right now.
I
that
would
are
say the
currently
state of
happening.
emergency for the United States of America, we would all probably want that to be utilized if we were called upon, I would hope. So if there was a state of emergency in Queen George County, let's say, I would hope you would want that to be, that's why it was in there, to leave that as an option to be able to use it if there was a state of emergency.
Okay.
Are firearms going to be stored on site?
No, no, sir.
And if I can go back to the vehicle.
Ammunition as well will not be stored on site.
Back to the vehicle question, we said that, so it sounds like the folks who'd be utilizing the facility will drive their own vehicles down, and then the notes the low traffic impact of 3 to 4 van loads of students arrive and depart together for scheduled classes. So I'm assuming those students would not be doing vehicular training, but where would those vans be coming from?
So most of the vans, most of the students are coming from Quantico. These are trained, this is overflow, low impact training from Quantico. So they're already on per diem, they've already traveled to do the training, and then they're being brought to the site to complete these components that they just simply don't have room for at Quantico.
Yeah. And so if I may dig a little deeper question, so a number of years ago, I think about 3 years ago, we had a proposed rifle range, shooting range come before us. Some of the elements of it were a little bit, I guess, non-palatable to a number of the members, including myself. And we've stated here, I believe, if I quote, it says state, local, and federal governmental agencies. So as far as the contracts that are going to be let, my question is kind of twofold. Is one is how do we delineate state, federal, or local government agencies? What's that threshold? I mean, are they taxpayer-funded institutions or municipalities? And are we limiting to strictly those municipalities or agencies that are American? Meaning, are we going to have any foreign nationals
No, we're
utilizing
not.
this facility?
We're training American citizens.
Okay. And can we get that? Would you have any problem including that language within the application as well?
I mean, those are the trainings that we're after. We're after trainings that our letter agencies offer to vetted American citizens.
No, I understand, but when we're trying to make money, things might, if somebody comes with a good offer, and good offer is good offer, right? So, but I think we want to limit it to.
We're not going to Columbia and gathering up a bunch of guys and having them come and train at our facility. No, we are after letter agencies overflow, low impact trainings. I don't know how to be more clear on that.
I think if we spelled it out, it would be good.
We are after low impact letter agencies.
I hear it. I hear it. I'd like to see it. I hear it. I'd like to see it. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, I hope so. I hope we, yeah.
I'd like the Board of Supervisors to hear that, and I think it's beyond our scope as from land use
Yes, I
law.
would just say, Mr. Parker, what are you suggesting?
I would just like to see something in there that it would be limited to United States citizens and no foreign nationals, just for the security elements, especially given where we are located in the country.
I guess I would ask this question, and I don't know the answer, but maybe somebody does. Do only United States citizens work for the FBI or the CIA?
Right, it's not the students, it's the contract.
I think it's, yeah, I'm referring more to the
Customer
contracts
has to
that
be-
we're letting, yeah, thank you, Mr. Jacory.
With
it
federal,
says-
state, local.
So you want United States government agencies instead of just federal, state, local agencies?
Correct, better stated, absolutely,
We
yes.
have no
Yes.
objection.
Yeah,
We have
okay.
no objection to
Okay.
inserting the words United States
Okay.
before
Or just
federal, state,
federal.
local agencies.
Well, I only say that because there were some overtones of militia elements in the last one we saw, and that's just where I'm trying to go with that, so.
Are there any other comments?
Yes, I'd like to. I'd like to compliment Linda and her staff for the thoroughness. We especially appreciate your work with the community, which has been something we've had to work through, in addressing their questions, identifying their concerns prior to the work. Your thoroughness of your package and the completeness, whether it's over thorough or not, is for other judgment, but I do want to express my compliments for the project. And if approved, I wish every success.
Think they want to put them back? I think we should ask them if they want to make the changes. I'm afraid the board would get him and say, screw it. You know? Yeah.
Okay, so we had a lot of discussion. There were a lot of points that we want to make sure that's surfaced in any motion that might come forward. There was even discussion that, maybe it's the Board of Supervisors that needs to take a look at this. So I'll throw it out there. Do we have a motion for either one of these cases, up or down? And then yeah, what?
I think we have a list of, you have how many?
I have, it's 5, it's really sort of a 4A, 4B kind of thing. But yes, I can just quickly recite what I think I heard amongst the group. So number 1 is inserting the operations will comply with the King George noise ordinance at all times. That's 1. just clarifying that the hours of operation that are applicable to the King George Sheriff's Department, and in combination with that, the issue about using silencers on the rifles, right? Then I have
On the hours, did we do, I know we did the hours for the Saturdays. We mentioned holidays. I don't know if you put major holidays. I don't. You guys are, I'm sure, closed anyway, but.
how many federal employees work on major holidays?
Put in there.
And then, so just to continue, so then we had Mr. Parker's concept of adding like United States, state, and local officials, just qualifying that. And finally, I'd like to see included in this that ammunition will not be stored on that site, because I think that's an opportunity for theft that we don't want in this area, right?
Yeah.
Is your intention to store firearms there as well? So then can we have that include ammunition and firearms will not be stored on site overnight, basically, right?
For the record, we will accept a condition that would prohibit the storage of ammunition or firearms on the site.
Very good. Did I get all of it?
Did we get specific hours of operation?
I don't think we ever settled on that.
We're 7 to dusk, I believe it was, and Saturdays for King George Sheriff's.
Right. When I was uncomfortable with dusk because it's an ambiguous term, I was recommending an hour before sunset.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I actually was thinking through the dusk part, and we brought that discussion up last night a little bit. And so, it's later in the summer, and it's earlier in the winter. I think the training here will occur realistically between 9 to 5. But staff will get there early, staff will stay late. I think if we could all settle on 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., then we've got a good defined hour, and then your Saturday hour for the sheriff. I couldn't remember what you said, but I think the 7 to 7 would be normal business hours Monday through Friday. And I only expect training to occur from 9 to 5.
Could we make a caveat there that training from 9 to 5?
Unfortunately, you have to have.
Or at least firearms discharge?
You have to have people get there ahead of time to set up things. You have to have people stay to clean up. They've got a slew of permits they've got to get from DEQ and other agencies, and they have site management responsibilities. So I'm just trying to give them a little bit.
Well, I don't think anybody up here cares about hours of business operation. I think hours were specifically firearm training. Is that correct?
I would think firearm and driving 9 to 5.
Right.
Our noise ordinance has 6 to 10 and 10 to 6 as the windows where the reduction of the noise allowed is. So I'd be fine with 6 to 10, 6 a.m. to
We
10
really
p.m.
need 7 to 7 if you all can stand it. We've done a lot of noise mitigation, and we have to stay within the noise ordinance.
Yeah.
And so we will stay at the 70 decibel level at the property line.
You're saying 7 to 7, not just hours of business operation, but of training operations as well? Sure, sure.
Earlier in the winter, so that's why we're trying to just.
But should it be for the benefit of the neighbors, is the question.
In all honesty, I don't think the neighbors are going to hear anything. If they do, then I guess we probably have to revisit this.
Okay.
But we're bound by the noise ordinance, so we have to live by it.
If
I think 7 to 7 we can work with.
I'm good 7 to 7. I'm good with that.
Really, if we're talking about noise, as long as they meet the noise ordinance, we're good, right?
Yeah,
True, but it's also traffic in the neighborhood as well.
it's traffic, yeah.
7 to 7, I think is fair outcome.
Okay, so now we've got to the point where we have either this long clunky.
Yeah, I was just gonna, well, hold on, go ahead.
Or we just clean it up and come back next month and we're good. I don't.
They're closing December 21st.
If I may, Mr. Chair, Ms. Washington's been taking copious notes, so she has a draft motion for you all. So if perhaps you wanted to take a brief recess, I think we could get copies to all of you.
So a draft motion broken out separate per case?
A draft motion for approval of the special exception with the 6 additional conditions that were enumerated by Mr. Fox.
All right, so we're talking about the special exception only right now.
Right.
Other one's plain.
The second case.
150. Well, let me ask the members. Would you be more comfortable in a motion, or would you be more comfortable if you saw it in the proposal, in a revised proposal? We could ask the applicant to go back, include these in the revised proposal, and come back when we reconvene in the next meeting.
I think that, to be fair, if we've pretty much made up our minds, I think we should move forward.
My concern is the board. They're not always apt to take our advice on things. So,
They won't next month either.
Mr. Chairman, we agree with your conditions, and we will include those in and go forward. We would like to go tonight if we can, and I'm happy to work with staff to draft these out so they're coherent, but they're pretty simple. We're just amending a couple, and we're adding pretty simple conditions that I've stated on the record we're all in agreement with.
I recommend we take a little break and get this recommended motion.
let's take a look. Let's get the motion.
Well, I'm going to draft a motion for the rezoning case. Do any attorneys want to help me with mine?
Oh.
All right, so
We got to vote on recess.
yeah, so we put a motion out there for recess till 9:30 to make it
Motion.
clean.
Yeah.
Second, all in favor? All right, we're in recess. Okay, so we're going to pick up the discussion where we left off. We are speaking to case number Z2023000150, the special exception. That's what we're speaking to right now. Do we have a motion? Okay, so we're all consuming the opportunity for motion. So when you're ready.
If I may, Mr. Chair, there might be a little confusion because in our haste to get you a motion, the underlined language are the additional conditions, but it looks like we inserted them into the sample motion for rezoning. But the same language and underlining, if there is the will to do so, that language could be added to sample motion 1 as additional conditions.
I think we're good.
I think it aligns.
I think it's good. 150 is where we're really drilling down. That's where you've got it. And 151, I think there was a lot of discussion, but I do believe that it was relatively clean other than the potential proffer discussion. Yeah, so we're working on 150 right now.
If I may clarify, what Ms. Lackey was speaking towards is that the approval with the conditions that we've added so we can incorporate everything was added to the recommendation for the rezoning application rather than for the special exemption application. So the only changes there are the underlined portions there. So those could simply be cut from number 2 and, if you will, placed into number 1. That is for the sample motion for the recommendation of the special exception.
For the record, this was the confusion I was talking about. 150 is the special exception.
Right.
151 is the rezoning.
Correct.
So they are in the special exception, right? Where they should be, right?
But
But they're.
Yeah.
The word.
Oh, I see.
Special exception.
Oh, gotcha.
So the motions were wrong before we put the addition in. Okay.
Would it be preferable if staff reran the sample motions and provided them to you?
Well said.
Basically, we just need to cross out rezoning application and insert special exception applications, correct?
No.
Okay, so if I were to read number 1 and then skip straight to the underlined portion, okay, you guys ready?
With the one minor change that the case number should be Z2023-00151.
No, special exception 150.
Sorry, I'm staying corrected.
I was going to say, I thought
You're
we were
correct.
doing, okay. I'm going to try this. I make a motion that I move to recommend approval of special exception request case number Z2023-00150 with draft special exception conditions to allow a training facility which will provide technical defense and orientation training for students as defined in the conditions and/or their family and staff in preparation for overseas assignments as related to military and defense departments in the A1 Limited Agricultural Zoning District on tax map parcel 31-14 located in the Rappahannock River Settlement Area. This recommendation is based on training facilities being permitted by special exception in the A1 Limited Agricultural Zoning District and the applicant meeting the conditions to be issued a special exception permit under King George Zoning Ordinance Section 5.4.1. This recommendation includes the applicant including the following additional conditions and their special exception conditions. 1, the applicant will include a condition to follow the county's NORDS ordinance. 2, the applicant will include the condition to use silencers with rifles which shall only be used by King George Sheriff's Office. 3, the applicant will include the condition that in addition to using the training facility during the normal hours of operation, the King George Sheriff's Office shall be permitted to use the facility on Saturday from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. 4, the applicant will include the condition that the training facility will only provide services to government agencies in the United States or states and localities of the United States. 5, the applicant will include the condition that firearms and ammunition will not be stored on site. And 6, the applicant will include the condition that the normal hours of business will be from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Monday through Friday. This recommendation is based on this rezoning being in accordance with the comprehensive plan. We gotta stop. Okay.
All right. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
With that motion, I'm sorry, I'm sorry to do this, but that motion, she said Z-2023-00150. That's the rezoning case, isn't it?
No.
Okay, no, I'm sorry.
I'm not the only one.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Now we will surface case number Z2023-00151, rezoning request.
I'd like to try it if I may.
Sir.
I'd move to recommend the approval of rezoning application case number Z-2023-00151 to rezone a 10-acre portion of tax map 31-14 from I industrial to A1 limited agricultural pursuant to the September 1998 proffer to restore this portion of the parcel 31-14 to the current zoning of the majority of the parcel, and all associated prior proffers are to be extinguished.
Was that with proffers?
With the input proffers. So we have a motion. Do we have a second? All in favor?
Opposed?
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. DeVries, if I may, that was not a sample motion, correct? Could you share your list with me after this so that I can record that adequately? Yes. Thank you.
Does that work?
Okay. Any old business? No. New business? Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll keep this one brief. Few announcements. The Board of Supervisors will hold a public hearing for the draft zoning and ordinance overhaul. That will be on the December 19th agenda. While I have it, I'd also like to mention, I've talked to several of you, so many others may have a question as well, that at the last December 5th meeting, they received comments on a draft of the current King George County noise ordinance. Those were for amendments to it, so that is not to replace the ordinance we worked on through the work sessions. This kind of adds in that aspect. That is enforced by the sheriff's office, whereas this new one coming in with the draft ordinance is through the community development office. Just want to provide that clarification. Additionally, after publication of the director's report, Jason Frazier, who is a building inspector with the department, he's been here for 15 months, put in his resignation. His last day will be December 24th. Jason received a great opportunity in the private sector, and we wish him well in his future endeavors. For the month of October, the department did 9 new single-family dwellings, 22 occupancy permits, and 8 home occupations, totaling 67 permits with a total intake of $63,119.93. We also did a total of 623 inspections. We received many submissions over these before the new ordinance takes hold. 2 of the bigger ones, Harwood Power Major Subdivision. This is on tax map 17, parcel 77, located off of 301. It is a split zone parcel. The major subdivision intention is to split off 2 industrial parcels for hopes of having a battery energy storage facility and a Dominion substation. Additionally, we received the 3rd submission of the Green Energy Ventures rezoning. If you remember, that's the other data center rezoning, kind of in the same proximity to the Amazon Birchwood ones. Upcoming items on your agenda: favorite meeting of the year, organizational meeting. That's scheduled for January 9th. We'll have the election officers, real estate disclosure forms, all that fun stuff. So look forward to that one. And that will conclude the director's report.
Thank you. Other business. Okay, with that, we have a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor? We are adjourned.